It's 8 o'clock out. There's one person on, so let me just let her in and hopefully more people join us. Oh, they're coming now. Welcome everyone, it's 8 o'clock. Let's wait a few more minutes and then we'll start with the presentation. I see people are starting to come. Great. Good evening, everyone. Let's wait another minute and then we'll start. For those who joined us, we're still waiting a minute and then we'll start. Okay. Good evening, everyone, and welcome to TRM's last call in residence over Zoom for this season. And I emphasize for this season, we're excited to already plan for next year. So again, if you have any good ideas, please let us know. In the meantime, we want to share with you this upcoming tonight's scholar in residence. We have a great pleasure of having a local Riverdale resident joining us this evening. So let me introduce you to Dr. Rivka Elitzur-Leiman. Dr. Rivka Elitzur-Leiman is a postdoctoral student affiliated with the Skirball Department in Hebrew and Judaic Studies at NYU. Her research and a research fellow at the ERC project listed an illicit ritual in Jewish and Christian magical traditions. And my Italian is a bit rusty, but let me try to take this opportunity. At the Università Ca' Foscari, Venezia. I guess that's in Venice. That's how good my Italian is, I guess. Rivka wrote her PhD thesis at Tel Aviv University on Jewish amulets from a late antique Palestine. Her current project is focused on ancient Jewish magical texts as source for social history. And as I mentioned, and I want to say it again, because we're very proud that Rivka, Dr. Elitzur-Leiman, is a local resident. She lives in Riverdale with her husband, Yoni, and their children, Noam, Gilad, Rotem, and Noga. So without further ado, we'll have Dr. Elitzur present to us now, and we look forward to hearing from you. Thank you so much for being with us tonight.
Thank you, and thank you for the presentation. And I'll just share my screen. Your Italian is amazing. Okay. No, just a second. Okay. Sorry about that. Okay, can you see?
Yes.
So I wanted just to give you, as I wrote here, a glimpse into ancient Jewish magic. What I do, I'm a scholar of ancient Jewish magic, and in more particularly, I work on ancient amulets from late antiquity. But I wanted to start with a small, call it an introduction through these photos. And this is, of course, contemporary. You can see here a cemetery in Israel. It is in Jerusalem. It's a historical cemetery, and you can see here a few graves of rabbis. And as we all know, the Jewish practice to put stones on the grave, and also because it's a rabbi's grave, you can see here the notes, the little notes with some bakashot or prayers for specific things that people ask. But you can also notice on this grave, and also on in this photo, you can also notice not only in small pebbles or small stones, but also these bricks. You can see it here and here. And these bricks, if you enlarge the photo, and this is taken from a paper that has recently been published by Professor Gidon Bohak, you can see that it is written, and the text is, with a very simple marker. The text is in Hebrew, and it says, I translated it, it says this: with God's help, Shaul, son of, and this is deleted not to expose the person, but his mother's name is here. And just as this brick was burned in a fiery oven, so shall burn the heart of Shaul, son of X, who lost his faith, so that his heart will be turned toward heaven in a good manner. So this is we see here a practice, and the text says that this brick was burned in an oven, and on some bricks like that, you can see the traces even of a fire. And we can see that someone is concerned that certain Shaul יצא לתרבות רעה, became secular, became non-religious, and this in some way has to help him to get back to religion. And if we want to trace where this tradition came from, we can go to some books of magic that we know, books of sgulot that we know until this day. This is kind of recent book text published in the 60s of sgulot, many things that you can do to help to gain certain specific goals. And this is, again, I translated into English, a tikkun for he who has gone out into a bad culture. שיצא לתרבות רעה, God forbid, one should take a new brick and place it in an oven that was heated before the Shabbat in order to bake bread for the Shabbat, and he should leave it, the brick, until the next Shabbat, after the Shabbat bread has been baked. Then he should take the brick and write upon it the name of the person, just as we saw in the picture before, and the name of his mother. And he should say, just as this brick burns in the fiery oven, so shall burn the heart of X, son of Y, who has lost his faith, so that he will return, and his heart shall be turned toward heaven in a good manner. and the writer should say this 3 times and place the brick on the grave of a tzaddik, and you will see wonders. So we see here the theory behind this practice that is, again, practiced until this day. And going even more back in the past, we ask ourselves, who invented this practice? Where did it come from? And we find this very interesting archaeological finding from the 6th century. This is small potsherd that was found near Be'er Sheva in Churvat Rimon, a place called Churvat Rimon. It was found next to an ancient synagogue. And this is an Aramaic love spell that was engraved on a potsherd that was then burned in fire. And it says thus, and this is very reconstructed, but it is based on other texts that we know from this period and from medieval period. So this is in Jewish Aramaic, the Aramaic that people spoke these days in the land of Israel. You holy and mighty angels, I adjure you, just as this sherd burns, so shall burn the heart of someone whose name begins with Reish, son or daughter of Marian, after me, I, and then the name of the person should have been mentioned, but again, it's broken. And you should turn his or her heart and mind and kidney so that he or she will do my desire in this ... So we don't know what's the end of this text. But we can say that this is a text that was meant to cause someone to fall in love with him. And this is a very known practice from the ancient Judaism, and this is a very Jewish technique to gain this goal. And it is very interesting to see the way this was adapted during the years. First of all, it is interesting to see the way it was preserved from the 6th century to nowadays, to the 20th or 21st century. And second of all, it is interesting to see the way it was changed during the time, because the way love was perceived in the 6th century in such an aggressive way, and a very, right, you force someone to fall in love with you in this spell, and you want her heart to be burned like the fire. This is not the way modern culture, Western modern culture, perceive love. But during time, other concerns started to pop up, and other things are concerning us as Jews. One of them is people who leave the religion, and this was switched into text that is meant to make someone fall in love with God, right? So this is a very interesting thing, and I opened it to show the continuity in Jewish magic, and also to show that it exists. It is around us, because many times when I talk about Jewish magic, I hear people say it is not Judaism, or we don't have such things. But if you open your eyes to these things, you can find it everywhere. And so many people have used an amulet in their life, or have been suggested by other people to use an amulet. So many people say bli ayin hara when they talk about their kids or their grandchildren. So all this, we would say that this is magic, this is Jewish magic, but we just have to open our eyes and see. We don't have a lot of time, but I just wanted to show you a bit of what I'm working on. So I'll start with maybe the coolest piece. This is it doesn't look very attractive. This is a small piece of lead. This is smaller than the screen of my computer, maybe in the size of an iPhone. And this was found folded and pinned with a nail. You can see the iron nail in the ancient city of Antioch, which is today in the area of Turkey, but in past times in the early Byzantine Empire, it was a very, very important and big city, and Jews also lived there, but of course this is not a Jewish city. And this lead tablet was found in the hippodrome of the city. So the hippodrome of the city, a very quick introduction. The hippodrome was a place where the chariot races took place. This is just a nice illustration from France, from the 2nd century. You can see here the race between the charioteers. Each charioteer had a chariot with 4 different horses, which is of course something that is very, very hard to negotiate. And you can also notice maybe the different color shirts of the charioteers: green, blue, red, and white. And this was a very strong and common thing in the ancient world. There were 4 groups in these races, and the people who supported the groups were very, very involved fans. You can see it here, the different colors, and you can see here the way I try to illustrate the way it worked is very, very similar to what we know today from different sports competitions. The fans were very involved. And one of the ways to affect the competition was to write curse tablets. This is an example for a few of them. We know hundreds of curse tablets found in different hippodromes in the Roman and Byzantine Empire. And these were written, as you can maybe notice here, in Greek or in Latin, and they were very aggressive. So the text was against the charioteers and against the horses, and it had the names, the specific names of the charioteers and the specific names of the horses. And this was very common. You would write it on lead, because lead was considered aggressive, and you would fold it and then bury it under the hippodrome in order for the horses to go over it and to be influenced by it. This is an old photo of Antioch. We know from the Jewish tradition, we know at least 2 different sources that has instructions of how to create this type of curse text. So this is a source from Sefer Harazim, the Book of Mysteries, an ancient Jewish book written in Hebrew, probably in the land of Israel, sometime in late antiquity, that has a very specific recipe. If you wish to race horses, even when they are exhausted, ... take a silver lamella. Lamella is a very thin leaf of metal, and write upon it the names of the horses and the names of the angels, and say, I adjure you, angels, etc., etc. And then after you say this incantation, take the lamella and conceal it in the racing lane of the one you wish to win. So this is a very interesting example, relatively famous. And another example that we have is from a later, again, a later book written, probably edited probably sometime in the in medieval period. But again, we have another text that instruct how to create this type of curse tablet. If you wish to ruin him, meaning to make him fall or stumble, write the sword. The sword is magic names on a copper lamella, and bury it in the field, or in the Hebrew word says kamton, which is a word that is hard to explain, and they will be devastated. So these are the attestations that we have for Jewish circus magic, but until this date we only had the Greek circus texts that were found. We never found something that was written in Aramaic until this discovery. It is in Princeton University, and it was found in their excavations in Antioch about 100 years ago. It is very hard to decipher, as you can see. You can see nothing here, and it took us a lot of time to see anything, but in the end, I created this illustration. As you can see here, first of all, it has a very interesting three faces, frontal faces, which maybe illustrates the three angels, Michael, Gabriel, and Raphael. And if maybe you can notice if you know how to read this. So this is the name Michael, this is the name Gabriel, and this is the name Raphael. But the most important thing about this piece is that it is written in Jewish Aramaic, which means that a Jewish Aramaic magician or a practitioner wrote it. And we can notice a few very interesting words here. The word Venet, which is not for the Prime Minister of Israel, but for the Greek or Latin word Venetoi, which means the blue faction. So this curse text was meant against the blue faction of the charioteers in this specific competition. And a very interesting word that we discovered here in this text is the word kamta, kuf mem tet hei, which probably stands for the Greek word. You shouldn't be able, I mean, I don't expect you to read, but you can see that this word refers for the turning point of the hippodrome. I have here this very nice scene from Ben Hur, a famous movie from the 50s. And you can see here how he turns his chariot with the 4 horses. And this was a very fragile point of the race, because this was the hardest part of the competition. And this is exactly where the people who wrote these texts wanted to hide their texts, because they would look for the most fragile point. And interestingly, so we have here in this Aramaic text this word, but we also know, because it was found in archaeological excavations, we also know that it was found exactly in this point. So this person who wrote this text knew that this is the best place to hide the texts. He wrote it on his tablet, and also hide it in the scene in the same point. So this is a very interesting point of connection between all these things. And the most maybe interesting part here is in the last part of the inscription. It says in Aramaic, At mal'acha dekam kodam atane de Bil'am kum kodam, and then it breaks, so we don't know what's there. So you, the angel who stood in front of the donkey of Balaam, stand in front of ... And this, of course, refers to the biblical story about Bil'am ben Beor, who was, it says in the Bible, Kosem. He was a magician, and he was hired by Balak ben Zippor, the king of Moab, to curse the children of Israel. And on his way to curse them, he was riding his donkey, and his aton, his she-donkey, and the donkey sees this angel of God and stops. But Bil'am can't see him, and he doesn't understand what's going on, etc., etc. This is the story. It's a very, I'm sure you all know it. And this is very interesting that this person who writes a curse text against the horses of the blue faction, he calls the same angel from the Bible that stopped once the donkey of Balaam to come again into the scene in Antioch, and to stop the horses of the opponent faction. So this is a very interesting point where a Jew who knows the Bible, who knows the stories, who knows, and on the other hand, he knows the magic practices. He knows how to use lead tablets. He has this iron nail that he uses. He knows where to hide the tablet, but still he mixes between the traditions in a very interesting way, between his Jewish traditions and magical traditions, which are usually not, we wouldn't consider them as Jewish, and he is doing it in a very beautiful way. So this is one thing that I wanted to show you. And in the time that's left, I just show you a few more things. So when we are talking about the period of late antiquity, starting from the 4th century and until the beginning of the 7th century or late 7th century, depends on the place, we see in the archaeological findings really like a very big boom of magical objects. And this is very interesting. At once, we find thousands and thousands of attestations to Jewish use of magic. And we find it in both big communities of the Jews in that time, one in Babylonia and one in the land, on the other hand, in the land of Israel. And this is what I showed, what I brought you here in this slide, is our incantation balls, which are found in Sasania and Babylonia, again, beginning the 4th century. And this is very interesting because when we talk about the Babylonian Talmud, we have so much information about the rabbis and the Talmud, but we don't have even one remain of the times of the Jews in Babylonia from that time, except for this huge discovery of the incantation balls, which were written in Jewish Babylonian Aramaic, the same vernacular that was written, that the Babylonian Talmud was written in. And we have, it's really a large group. We know almost 2,000 balls from this type. So what is an incantation ball? It is a simple ball that, as you can see, was inscribed with ink in circles, and the text contains incantations against demons and evil spirits and all kinds of Liliths and creatures that was meant to harm people. You can see that it was, in many cases, there are illustrations and these funny figures in the middle. So sometimes, like in this case, they represent the demons. And how do I know that they are demons? Because they are represented with cables, or they are bound in some way. So you can see here the in between the legs, this line, it bounds them so they can't release themselves, so they can't harm the people. And the texts are also binding them. So the texts are also, you are bound, you can't come to this person. So this is a motif that repeats over and over again. And sometimes, like in this case, the illustration probably represents the practitioner, the magician who tries to get rid of these demons. And you can see that here he holds branch of some kind of plant, and he tries to drive away the evil spirits with this branch. So this is a very interesting representation. These balls were meant to protect the houses of the people in Babylonia. Most of them, unfortunately, comes from the antiquity market, but those who were excavated were found mainly in Nippur, and were found when they are upside down under the floors of the houses, private houses. And it is also reflected in the text, that the text contain many names, the name of the father and the mother and the children, and it is very interesting to read them. They are only a small amount of them have been published to date, so it is in process to publish them and to work on these bowls. And from the other part of the ancient world, so when we talk about the land of Israel, and not only the land of Israel, also other parts of the early Byzantine Empire, such as some places in Europe, we find mainly these small sheets of metals that were used as amulets. And you can see that they have very, very tiny text letters on them. They were engraved with texts, again, incantations and spells against demons that were meant to protect the people who used them. In this case, unlike the incantation bowls that has the whole family on them, they were meant for one person, or if it is a pregnant woman, they were meant for the woman and the baby. But they almost never have more than one name. And you can see it was made of a variety of metals, gold, silver, copper, etc. And after they were written, they were inscribed, they were rolled or folded. You can see on some of them the traces of the folding, right? This is after they are opened in the lab. And then they were worn on the body. And we have this very beautiful illustration. This is of course not Jewish, and this is earlier than the period that we talk about, but these are representations from Egypt that shows how people used this type of amulets. They used to wear them in a container and to wear them as necklace or other type of jewelry. So this is what we have from the land of Israel in that period. And I just wanted to show you, again, this is, I showed you what we usually find, but this is a very interesting case of an unusual amulet that was found under the threshold of this ancient synagogue in Israel, in the Golan. You can see here the entrance for the building, and under the threshold was unearthed this piece of copper. And it has a long text, very interesting text. This is again in Palestinian Aramaic. It is called the vernacular that was spoken in the land of Israel in this period. I'll read the English translation. For your mercy and for your truth. This is a quotation from the book of Psalms. In the name of Hashem, we shall do and succeed. Strong and mighty God, may your name be blessed and may your kingdom be blessed. Just as you have suppressed the sea by your horses and stamped the earth with your shoe, and as you suppress trees in winter days and the herb of the earth in summer days, so may there be suppressed so and so before Yossi, son of Zenubia. May my word and my obedience be imposed on them. So this text was written for a person named Yossi, son of Zenubia, a person who probably lived in this village, who wanted his authority to be imposed on his townspeople. So what is he doing? He's writing this whole incantation with the names of God and the biblical quotations, and this formula that just as God his authority is on the earth and on the creatures, so Yossi's authority will be on the townspeople. And then he folds this piece of copper, and then he buries it where? In, as I showed you before, under the threshold of the synagogue. And why there specifically. So I think there are a few reasons, two reasons at least. One of them is that we know a magical practice in Jewish literature. I didn't bring here the translation, but there is again the ancient book Harva de Moshe, the Sword of Moses, that we know it's a Jewish book that has very ancient materials inside, and it has one of the with recipes for different formulas and sgulot. One of them, אם רצית שאימתך תהיה על כל בני אדם, if you want to be to have your authority or to control other people, כתוב על לוח עופרת, מילים מאגיות, write upon a lead tablet specific words and bury it in the synagogue בצד מערב on western side. So this text is again a recipe for someone who wants to control other people, and it instructs to bury it in the synagogue, and it really corresponds to what we saw in this archaeological finding, but also I think that exactly like we saw before in the circus text, in the text that was meant to achieve victory in Hippodrome, if you want to affect someone, you have to bury the magic item in a place that these people are around, right? Where these people act and where they pray in this specific case. And he wants to control all the community, and where is all the community gathering, and where will he find all the community? Exactly in the synagogue. So he buries it under the threshold, and every person from the community that comes inside will be affected by his text, by his curse text, you can say, or by his amulet, and will become under his control. What do you say, Sam? Do I have a few more minutes, or do you want to stop?
You have a few more minutes. Continue, please.
Okay, I'll continue. So maybe the last example that I'll bring here, very interesting silver amulet that was written for a person named Basila or Basila, which means something like king, son of Pancharis. Pancharis was the name of his mother, and this is again dated to the 4th to 7th centuries CE, and this is a part of a private collection in Jerusalem. This is the text and the translation, and you can see here that the text starts with a very regular formula. This is how these amulets look like usually. May there be driven out any fever and shiver and any horrors and lilies and hazards and yeror demons, who knows what it is, and bindings and sorcerers and any kind of evil and unclean spirits from Basila, son of Pancharis. So this is, again, a very regular text that takes all the bad things that can happen to this person and list them in a long list and drive away. Titgaer. It uses the verb that we know from the Bible, Yig'ar Adonai becha Satan, right? This is a verb that was meant to exorcise demons and evil spirits. And you can see here the fever and the shiver, the Esha ve'arai, which was a very common couple of words in this text, and it's very interesting to see. So they had a very limited knowledge of medicine, and if someone was sick, it was always with fever and shiver, right? So this was the main thing that they were focusing, which in our modern eyes looks today different, right? So today we wouldn't focus on that. So this is the first part of the incantation. And then comes a very unusual text that talks about Kol HaGoyim, all the Goyim. and it has two different biblical verses that has this term, kol hagoyim. Kol hagoyim ki'ain negdo. It comes from Yeshayahu. All the goyim before him are as nothing. And after that, we have another biblical quotation: the wicked shall be turned into Sheol, all the goyim that forgot God. Yashuvu rashaim leshola, and it says 3 times the word Yashuvu, 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 Yashuvu rashaim leshola, kol hagoyim shchichei Elohim. So we know that from the Bible. And between that, we have something that it is unparalleled, a text that we don't know from anything anywhere else. Kol hagoyim bakupa, all the goyim are in a basket or a sack or something like that. Vehakupa bayarden, the basket is in the Jordan River. Vehayarden megalgel veramei lego yama desdom, the Jordan River rolls and throws it into the Dead Sea. Yama desdom, Yam shel Sdom is the Dead Sea. And this is a very peculiar text that I didn't find any parallel to this text. And I tried to think, what does it mean? So is it a text that was meant to hurt all the goyim, kol hagoyim? I don't think so, because as we saw before, if you want to curse someone, there is a way to do that. It's not the way. It's not through these silver amulets that has a protective formula in the beginning. This is not the way to curse someone. This is one reason that I don't think that this is a curse text against all the goyim. And another thing is this very plurality of kol hagoyim. The Jewish magic is a very specific and individual tradition. Usually, if you want to hurt them, I'm not saying that it wasn't aggressive, and I'm not saying that there was no black magic. There was a lot, but still, if you want to hurt someone, it is very specific. You need his name and his mother name, and you will never write. I mean, it's very not according to the tradition to write something so general. There is a very interesting paper written by a scholar named Yuval Harari, who showed how during the Holocaust, some Kabbalists tried to stop the Holocaust through these sgulot and Jewish magical practices. And you can see that in all the examples that he shows, and he found really amulets that people wrote against Hitler. You can see that it's always against the specific name. So they tried to find the name of the personal name of Hitler and his mother's name in order to adapt the text to the specific need that was needed, right? But they even in that very terrible time, they wouldn't write against all the Germans or something like that. So this is a very basic structure, very basic character of the structure of Jewish magic. So and the text has all these kind of interesting characters. For instance, the idea of throwing someone to the sea is a very aggressive idea, and we can see that in different magic recipes to create curse texts and curse tablets, and part of the procedure is to throw them to the sea. So we see it is an aggressive idea to throw all the goyim to the sea. And we also know from the halacha, the idea of Yulichem liyam hamelach, to throw something into the Dead Sea specifically. And this happens when something can't be used because it is not pure. And more specifically, because it was bought from goyim or from people who are not Jews. That is, it is suspected as something that was used for avodah zarah. then you should throw it to the Dead Sea. So we can see here a mix of ideas and conceptions that are magic and also specific with relation to the goyim, but still it is not a real, what I would call a real curse text. So what happened here? What's the background for the writing of the creation of this amulet? What I think is that this person, and we go back to the photo, this person might have been concerned about all these problems. He had fever, he had shiver, he had this evil eye that someone casted on him, and maybe he had some problems with his goyim, with his non-Jews neighbors, or maybe he fought with them, maybe he had some other kinds of problems. And when he came to the practitioner who wrote him the amulet, he said, listen, I have all these problems, and also my neighbors are really bad, and I have all these clashes with them. And then he wrote the amulet according to the things that the client told him. And he also mentioned this formula against the goyim as part of the attempts to help him and to protect him from the evil spirits. I think with that, I will conclude. And if anyone has questions or, sorry, not part of it, questions or comments, I'm very happy to discuss that.
Can you tell me the difference between black magia and white magia? Magia levana and magia shchora?
So usually in academia, we wouldn't use these terms. We would use aggressive magic and just magic. Aggressive magic is something where when you try to force someone else to do what he doesn't necessarily want to do. For instance, the love magic, the love amulet that I showed in the beginning is considered aggressive magic because you want to force the person to love someone else. And this is aggressive by nature. If you curse the charioteers to that they will fall and can't move, etc., this is aggressive magic. But if you want to gain protection and healing, I wouldn't call it aggressive magic. This is like protective magic or a protopaic magic.
I'm sure you are familiar with Sefer HaRazim.
Yes.
So that's very aggressive.
So Sefer HaRazim, I brought a quotation from there. It has the recipe for chariot races. Sefer HaRazim has a lot of aggressive magic, but it also has protective magic, apotropaic magic. It's a mix. And it's interesting because if we compare it to what was found in excavations, so if we read Sefer HaRazim, we expect to find maybe 50% or even more products that were made for aggressive magic, and only the rest for a protopaic magic. But this is not the case if you look at the objects themselves, the amulets themselves. So most 95% of the amulets are for protection, for healing, and only the minority, which is what I showed, maybe what I showed you today is not representative. I showed you only the interesting stuff, which are more the aggressive stuff. But so this is the minority of what we find in excavations.
We have some questions on the chat, but I just want to, Dr. Elitzur, if you can maybe stop the participant sharing, I think it will be easier. If not, right. I can do it, but I think, yeah, this is much better. Okay, great. So we have some question also on the chat. So we had one question from the Fogelmans here. The question was, let me scroll. It says, maybe you can see, maybe you can read that, or I can read it, whatever is easier.
Yes, so these practices continued and continue for a long time. Do we have any evidence that individuals saw their efforts being effective? And if not, do we have information about why they continued other than simple wishful thinking and superstition? So that's a very good question. I know one paper, a very interesting one about incantation balls. Someone found incantation balls with date on them. This happens sometimes, so that you find a dating on the incantation ball, so you can know when was it written. And in one incantation ball, it was written for pregnancy. So someone who couldn't have children, and the amulet for her to get pregnant. And a few years later, you find another incantation ball written for the same couple with the same name, and just for healing and general protection. And then they have a child. So you can see that the first incantation ball helped them have a family. So this is a cute thing, but I don't know if it's a proof. And I don't know. I mean, I guess it continued because people always hope for better fate. And yeah, it's a very human thing to do, I think. And I think I studied this material for a few years now, but I think I didn't understand these people that stand behind these objects until the COVID pandemic started. And you see that when people are very desperate and they have no modern means to handle threats, sometimes they go to these areas, and sometimes this is what's left to do. So I hope I answered that.
We have another question from Bradley, from Brad Herkman.
Where is the line between magic and avodah zarah? So this is a very good question.
Good question.
I don't have a very good answer. I can only say that we can look at Chazal and what they thought about what we call magic, right? And this is also something debatable that we can. Many people wrote about what exactly is magic. Chazal had a complicated, say, view about it. From one hand, they talk a lot about demons and about the need to be protected from them. And sometimes they themselves, the rabbis, write amulets. And sometimes there is a place in the Talmud where there is a whole like recipes of all kinds of sgulot against specific things. So you see that they knew these things and they believed in demons. They believed in that these things exist. On the other hand, of course, they objected that, and you can say that when it came to aggressive magic or to black magic or to things that had to do with goyim or with avodah zarah or with outside of the limits of Judaism, they of course they wouldn't accept that. Sociologists says that that the word magic is a very it has a lot to do with the way we see ourselves and with relation to other religions, and that sometimes we would call what we do religion and what the other people do magic. and that this word is, of course, has very negative connotations, because what's the difference between, I don't know, Urim vetumim, right? And someone who is predicting the future in other cultures. So if you come from a criticizing point of view, you can say something like that. But of course, there are the stuff that are part of the tradition, and some stuff are out of the boundaries of what we would call Judaism. What I tried to show here today is that there are many things that are part of our culture, and that these traditions were always there. So these are very, very ancient traditions. And what we see today in contemporary Kabbalah Maasit, for instance, and in amulets that Harav Kaduri, for instance, wrote, we see things that track back to the time of the Talmud. So, and this is something that we can say, we can be very critical about, but we can't ignore that this was part of our culture for thousands of years.
Any more questions before we conclude? I see here.
Yeah, I'll ask something.
Yes, Isaac. Dr. Chevelle, please go ahead.
Yeah, if I recall correctly, you can remind me. I think that amulets played a role in the whole scandal of Rabbi Yaakov Emden and Rabbi Yonasan Eibeshitz, that Rabbi Yonasan Eibeshitz was accused of writing amulets that invoked Sabbatean, Kabbalah, etc.
Yes, I think you're right. This is not my specific field, but of course, this was part.
It ended up in. It's kind of interesting. It ended up in the public sphere instead of just, being tucked away in some corner of private lives and things like that.
What do you mean by public sphere?
That he was accused of writing Sabbatean from Shabtai Tzvi. He was accused of writing Kmiyot from Shabtai Tzvi. So that would already turned into a big public scandal. That was part of the whole. That was part of the whole dispute as to whether he was really a Sabbatean or not.
Yes, I agree. Thank you for the remark.
Any other questions, comments?
When they started to write on parchment, the amulet, because what you showed is primarily metal, etc.
So this is something, yes, maybe I should have added that. We assume that it was always also on parchment, but the parchment didn't survive. So these metals are, of course, they survive much better the time. And we know from Egypt, for instance, that they wrote many amulets on papyri and on parchment. But the climate of Egypt preserves much better these materials than the climate of Israel. In the Qumran scrolls, where we do have, of course, parchment, we have a few amulets. So, but it wasn't that common, at least to say from Qumran. Maybe it was common in other parts of the land of Israel, but not in this specific community.
Okay, thank you. In your lecture, you didn't mention the fact that many magicians use bones.
Yes.
And I found it, a lot. Using bones. The word chatumim, necherim batyemim. They play with the bones of skeleton or human being, whatever it is.
Yes. So this is again a very interesting thing. Today I was in contact with the museum of the Penn University. They have a very large collection of incantation bowls, and they have one one skull, human skull, that has the same incantations with ink. It's from the same period and it is Jewish, and no one knows how to explain that. We don't have recipes that says, Jewish recipes that says, write an incantation on a human skull. It's a very non-Jewish thing that we would write. It's something that the Jewish tradition usually takes the dead people out of the space and makes this separation between the living and the dead. But we know from Jewish tradition, Jewish magical tradition, that there are some instances that human bones are used. We also know from the Mishnah that there was a practice to take a masmer min hatzaluv, the nail that was used to crucify people, because back then it was unfortunately a common practice. So people used these nails. Maybe sometimes they used the nails and the bones. This is what I know about the use of bones.
Thank you so much. I want to be sensitive to time 9:01. We are lucky that Dr. Elitzur is around the corner, so maybe I shouldn't volunteer you, but we can, as you walk with your family on Shabbat, we'll come to you and ask questions. So without further ado, I'd like to ask Rabbi Lehrfield for final remarks.
Just a big yasher kochech. What such a fascinating and interesting discussion. Excited to see where your research continues to go. I really just wanted to say a big yasher koch to Sam Koenig and to the entire adult education committee who's put together just an outstanding program. Tonight is just one of many examples of just outstanding opportunities for learning and growth. So thank you, Sam, and thank you, Doctor, for making the time tonight. And like Sam said, I hope that we get to continue the conversation in the neighborhood.
I can write amulets for whoever needs. Just kidding. Thank you very much.
Thank you.